The decisions you think you're making freely, who you fall for, how hard you push yourself, whether you feel like you deserve good things, a lot of those decisions were made for you before you turned 12. A psychologist named Jeffrey Young spent years watching smart, capable people improve in therapy and then walk straight back into the same painful patterns. He wanted to know why. What he found was a map of the invisible architecture running underneath most adult behavior. This video walks you through that map. By the end, at least one thing on it is going to feel uncomfortably familiar. That's the point. Why do capable, self-aware people keep ending up in the same painful situations no matter how much work they've done on themselves? In the 1980s, Dr. Jeffrey Young was practicing cognitive therapy in New York. Cognitive therapy worked. It had real clinical results. But Young kept noticing a pattern among a subset of patients. They'd get better, develop tools, show genuine progress, and then, months later, they'd be back. Same toxic relationship, same self-sabotage, same dead end approached from a slightly different direction. The techniques hadn't failed, something deeper was resisting them. Young started mapping what he was seeing. After years of clinical observation, he identified 18 core schemas, deep emotional blueprints formed in childhood that the adult brain treats not as perspectives, but as permanent facts about the world. The brain doesn't examine a schema any more than it examines gravity. It builds a life around it. Here are a few. As you hear them, notice if any feel less like a description and more like recognition. Abandonment, the belief, formed early, that the people you love will eventually leave. Not a fear you can reason your way out of, a certainty the brain has logged as baseline. Adults carrying this schema aren't choosing unavailable partners on purpose. They're drawn to unavailability because familiar feels safe to the brain, even when safe and good are entirely different things. Defectiveness, the belief that something is fundamentally wrong with you, not what you do, but what you are. People carrying this schema often become extremely high-performing because performance feels like compensation, but no achievement ever fully lands because the schema is running a different calculation underneath every success, not proof of ability, but proof of acceptability. Subjugation, the belief that your own needs don't matter or that expressing them leads to punishment or loss. People with this pattern become skilled at reading and meeting everyone else's needs. They're genuinely confused when they feel empty afterward because they've been making themselves small so long that their own wants feel almost foreign. Unrelenting standards, the goalpost moves every time you reach it. Rest feels dangerous. Good enough never actually feels good enough, and the finish line is always just slightly further than wherever you are right now. Emotional deprivation, the deep certainty that real connection isn't available to you, that no one will ever truly understand what you need or be able to give it. People carrying this schema often have full social lives and still feel profoundly alone inside them. Where do these patterns actually come from? And why does understanding them feel like finally reading the instructions for something you've been using wrong for years? Schemas form before age 12, during the period when the brain is building its core operating system. A young brain doesn't have the capacity to question its environment. If the environment communicates that you are too much, the brain logs "I am too much" as a fact of the world. If the environment says love comes with conditions, conditional love becomes the baseline expectation. This isn't a character flaw in the child. It's how a developing brain organizes information to survive the circumstances it's in. The reason these patterns are so stubborn in adulthood comes down to neuroscience. Schemas don't live in the logical, analytical parts of the brain. They live in the amygdala, the region responsible for threat detection and survival response. When something in your environment triggers a schema, the amygdala fires before the prefrontal cortex, your rational decision-making center, even gets a chance to weigh in. Your emotional reaction happens before your thinking does. You don't choose the response. The schema chooses it, and your conscious mind catches up a few seconds later and starts building a justification for what already happened. Schemas also cluster. Someone carrying abandonment often also carries defectiveness, the internal logic being, People leave because something is wrong with me. Someone carrying subjugation often also carries emotional deprivation. I don't express my needs, so they never get met, and the deprivation confirms the original belief. The schemas reinforce each other. They build a worldview that feels internally consistent because all the incoming evidence has been filtered to support it. Can these patterns actually change, and if so, what does that process look like in real life? Yes, but it takes longer and works differently than most people expect. The work undeveloped, schema therapy, focuses first on identifying the original wound. What experience first taught the brain this particular story about the world? Then it works through corrective experience, something in the present that repeatedly challenges the schema's authority until the brain starts building alternative neural pathways. Not erasing the schema, giving it a competitor. Schema therapy typically takes 18 months to 3 years for deeply entrenched patterns. That timeline surprises people used to thinking of therapy as something that produces results quickly. But when you understand that you're not just shifting a thought pattern, you're building new neural architecture to compete with something wired in since childhood, the timeline makes sense. The brain is genuinely plastic, it changes. But it changes through repetition, through consistently choosing differently in the moments the schema is most loudly arguing against it. The clinical literature documents high-achieving people who systematically undermine their own advancement, turning down promotions, minimizing contributions, deflecting recognition. The identified schema in many such cases, defectiveness rooted in environments where success was met with jealousy rather than celebration. After sustained schema work, many of those people accepted what they'd been refusing. They described it as terrifying, they did it anyway. The schema didn't disappear, it lost the authority to make decisions on their behalf. Here's the most important reframe, the one that changes how all of this feels. The patterns you carry are not your personality. They're not evidence of damage or weakness. They're the story your child brain told itself to survive a specific set of circumstances. That story was the best available interpretation at the time, and it kept you safe. It just wasn't designed to run indefinitely. The schema kept you protected when you were small. It's your adult life it's disrupting now. Recognizing a schema as it fires, noticing the familiar feeling, the old narrative, the pull toward the known, is the moment the update becomes possible. Not easy, not instant, but possible and available every single time it happens. The update is always available whenever you decide to run it. That's the finding underneath all of Jeffrey Young's clinical work. Not that schemas disappear. They don't. Not that the work is fast or painless, it isn't. But that the brain that built the pattern in childhood is the same brain that can build something new in adulthood, given consistent exposure to a different story. If any of this felt like someone quietly describing your own life, you're not alone. Subscribe for more conversations about the patterns underneath behavior.